quick words about the guest book project for narrative hospitality and why I think you're such a worthy recipient of it. In this, your golden age, your golden days, 14 years here in the Áras, and you have displayed throughout all those years the importance of narrative hospitality. As some of you may know, myself and the President go back a long way to the days of the crane bag, when I'd be up late receiving articles from the President for publication in the crane bag in long hand, foolscap long hand, about 20 pages. And he'd say, Richard, get that down to 10 pages for me by tomorrow at 12. And then we'd meet and we'd talk endlessly about the ideas. Politics, philosophy, poetry. They were very special times. And the President at the time was a professor and a poet already, of course, but a professor in Galway. And in any case, we've kind of come full circle. How many years was that? 1977. And during all that time, the President has been an exponent and the epitome in many respects for me, and I think for so many others, of narrative hospitality. I'd like to begin the conversation by asking you, President, to say a few words about how your project, Machnamh 100, addressed some of these issues of narrative hospitality.
Taking your question about Machnamh, I remember Machnamh was really born in this room here, the room next door, after a meeting with a committee that were responsible for commemorations. And it wasn't clear as to what was coming, but I was very, very conscious of the idea of the distinction between simple eventing. There's a kind of horsemanship that's associated with eventing. But we were coming to the same thing in relation to commemorations, not just in Ireland, but in Europe, where you had to have an event, and then you said, isn't it great, it all went well, and so forth. And I thought it needed more consideration than that. How were you to interpret, for example, the distinction between memory, a conscious public act of memory, social memory, what is in the collective memory, and then how you make transitions to making choices where you say that we're going to commemorate this rather than that, and so forth. And then you got these. So I'd wanted to address all of these issues. So from the very beginning then, and Machnamh, what I was interested in doing was asking people within the historiography how they had come to their different interpretations of events, and also beyond the historiography, what had been excluded, particularly in relation, for example, the role of women, and the role, unfortunately, something that is not solved yet, although things are a bit better, the elimination of social class from Irish historiography. I think we must be very careful not to become entrapped into a kind of abstraction, as if these are in fact just simply academic issues. They're not. The circumstances in which we are meeting this morning are very particular. The speech given by President Trump at the United Nations General Assembly is a unique historic event. It is an extraordinary event that people listened to it and so forth and are still in great confusion as to how to respond. Our own Taoiseach has distanced himself from it, which I very much welcome. But a very elderly priest yesterday said to me, sitting next to me at a funeral I was attending, did anybody walk out? And I said, not to my knowledge. And I believe that we're in conditions where the elementary etiquette of discourse that has been assumed by neoliberalism and by its alternatives, in fact, no longer prevails. You're having a very new version. And I think I have, looking back on my own work, I think it is associated with Irish history too, the role of the church, in particular in 30s, 50s, elsewhere. The inability to handle the question of the state, we've all been through that. The confusion of the distinction between religiosity and spirituality and so forth. And then when you come to it, how do you address this? Why do I hold this view? The discourse has changed. The media has changed. And as well as that, I think it has brought me back to a root philosophical question. When I gave my first speeches as President of Ireland, I remember well using those phrases, what can we know? What must we do? How to act? And so forth.
Immanuel Kant.
Immanuel Kant, yes. And when I was doing that, I have ended up reading about the division between Paul Ricard and Derrida in relation to the distinction between absolute hospitality and conditional hospitality. But I think it's deeper than that. I think the person that now where I am now is with the doorknob. I thought I resisted in most of my speeches getting to an Adorno moment, that is of the deep pessimism, that we would come to a form. I think the valuable work of that school very much, for example, making the important addition that domination is more than just simply economic exploitation or whatever, that domination is. And I think we are, in fact, we do not have an adequate discourse to deal with the impact of technology as a new form of domination in our lives. I think it's very, very difficult to talk about exchanging narratives, when in fact what is at stake is this, not any kind of dialogue with competing narratives, but the suppression of intercultures. The 19th century gave us a legacy of imperialism that suppressed hundreds of languages, several traditions, cultures, and we were afraid to call it out very often. And thus, to me, when people say, for example, about it, it is a matter of getting the opposites to talk to each other, it's a very limited road. And you could end up actually as a kind of an apologetic, evasive action in the face of competing fascism. And that is a real danger. Where we are now, I think, is, we have to mention, but to my point about the kind of capitalism, it's very different in a way, because it's now delivered into our lives through technology. The realm of accountability has shrunk. The realm of unaccountability with new instruments is ever more threatening. And therefore, what should we do? And I think our discourse, in a way, it can't be rather like the Derrida, Ricard one about, for example, the meaning of hospitality. I also question my good friend Luke Gibbons' notion, which is, I think, that it is modernity only is the problem, and that in previous forms of cultures there was an inherent hospitality. I think it's a nice idea, but I would like to see anthropological investigation of it in different circumstances. Now.